Cape Crusaders, please join me in welcoming a very special guest to our show, the designer of the 1989 Batmobile, the 1989 Batwing, and Batman's grappling gun from that film. And he has also created so many other various concept designs for films that you love. Please join me in welcoming Julian Caldow to the show. Julian, how are you today?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
We're good. I've got Ben here as well. Say hello, Ben.
I'm terrific. Thank you very much. I'm very well.
Hi, Ben.
Julian, it blew my mind when I started talking to you because you actually don't live that far away from me, man, which was so surprising to know. Because well, I'll instantly start with you've created, to me, some of the most iconic vehicles in cinema history. And the fact that you created the Batmobile, the design of that Batmobile, is just, it's something that as a kid, when I was watching that, I was like, that is the car that I want to own. Like, if I ever had stupid money, I would own that car because I know it drives and it can do all these things, and I know people have done that in their lifetime. So right off the Batman, hey, how
Good. Well done.
how did you come about to designing the Batmobile?
Well, it was really a kind of an accident because that film was my first art department job. I had been working in creature effects for 3 or 4 years before then, but I wasn't very good at it. And there was plenty of people who were much better than me, and also I was getting headaches from the chemicals. So I thought I'd better get out. I had some fun times. I worked on Aliens and Hellraiser and Willow, and I found the opportunity on a film called High Spirits. I don't know if you would know, it's a Neil Jordan film, a comedy he did. I was working with a guy called Nick Dudman, who was doing the makeup, and I was helping him out doing the makeup for this comedy film. And Anton first was doing the design.
Right.
Now, I didn't know who Anton was then, but I realized he had done the design for Company of Wolves, which, as it turned out, was something that I wanted to make as a final film when I was at art college doing a film and TV BA. So I was kind of very interested in his approach. So I took the opportunity on that film, on High Spirits, to go to the art department to show him my drawings. Because I'd been doing all of these illustrations in my spare time, sort of inspired by people like Sid Mead and Joe Johnston and Chris Foss and those kind of people. And I just sort of thought, well, maybe I can get a job in the art department. So I put this stuff under his nose, and he was kind of intrigued. He was a brilliant illustrator himself. So it was very flattering for him for him taking the time going through all of this stuff. And he just said, well, we might have something for you because next year we're doing a Batman film. Now, as a youngster, I was never a big fan of the comics. I was more a Hulk person when I was a kid, but I did like the TV show when I was in, when I was about 8 or 9. I remember watching the TV show. And so I was kind of intrigued by it. But the thing which really sort of sparked my imagination was the previous year, I think I'd read the Dark Knight comic.
Returns.
Right.
Yeah, yes. Was it Alan Moore and who did
Frank Miller?
Frank Miller, correct.
Yeah.
And I hadn't read anything like that as far as any comics. It was so revolutionary, and I thought, well, maybe they're going to go a bit dark, less comic, more, something a bit gritty. And I wasn't sure. I can't say for sure whether that was Anton's. He told me that was where they were going, but sure enough, either I called him, pestering him the following few months, or he called me. I can't remember. But I went into Pinewood and started basically as a runner. But they put me on to various projects, which I was completely incapable of doing because I didn't understand about scale. So, for instance, I was photocopying pictures of New York storefronts and buildings to make a sort of very simple mock-up with the art director, Les Tompkins, for the backdrop, for the backlot.
Right, well, for Gotham.
So yes, there was you know about that set. That's an incredible set.
Yeah.
But we were just trying to get a configuration of how the streets would work, etc. But it was very clear early on to Les that like all the doors and the windows were the wrong scale. I was just photocopying various different things, and I didn't really have a grasp of that. So he kind of, I don't know what conversation had behind my back, but I think it was like, yeah, I don't think he knows how to do this. Get somebody else to do it. So I don't think it was very long, maybe just a couple of weeks. And Anton said, do you want to crack at the Batmobile? And I was like, well, yeah. So, I got out my crayons and started doing stuff. And I remember going into town to get some research of like concept cars. And I think I was going a little bit sort of futuristic. I was sharing a room then with Nigel Phelps, who's now a very talented production designer in his own right. And he was kind of handling a lot of the city stuff. So I was sort of trying to do the vehicles, but I was kind of floundering. I was thinking of kind of a Pontiac or something like that, a Pontiac Firebird or a Corvette Stingray with fins. But everything that I was showing Anton, he was sort of saying, well, it's not really a car, is it? It's kind of a statement. And,
right, okay.
I kind of thought, I don't know, that's not, it's not necessarily a quote, but that's kind of my recollection. And I just sort of sat there thinking, well, where do we go if it's not a car? And I thought that we need to go like the land speed record cars.
Yeah.
These crazy vehicles that they did did these land speed things in these salt flats in America.
Yeah, like rockets with wheels, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean the one vehicle that sort of sprang to mind in my head was a vehicle I had no pictures of then, but I remembered from Top Trumps when I was at school. The Top Trumps cards.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was one of this thing called the Green Monster. And I just remembered this picture and started sketching these things with a big rocket down the middle. Now, the Green Monster, I think it was two brothers who built this thing. And they basically got a F-105 jet engine. Don't know if you're familiar with that jet. It's the Starfighter. Absolutely incredible jet that didn't have any wings. Chuck Yeager used to fly. Chuck Yeager tried to fly the Starfighter into space. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Right Stuff, but an incredibly powerful jet. And they basically put this thing on wheels. And that was the basis. And if you get a picture of that car, you'll see, that's kind of the Batmobile. That's the germ of the Batmobile there.
Right.
And I did a vehicle with a jet going right through the vehicle, so that the jet and the outtake at the back was sort of just one big rocket with cockpits on either side. And if you look on my Instagram, you'll see that.
Yeah,
image.
I remember seeing that image. It looks awesome.
So the initial design had two cockpits.
Well, the Green Monster obviously didn't. It had a cockpit on one side and obviously counterweighted on the other. But I was thinking of the TV show, which had Batman and Robin sort of sitting in these. Although they were side by side, they had their own separate sort of cockpit glass.
Yeah,
and so I was thinking along those lines. And when Tim Burton saw that, I think he liked it, but he said, we've got dialogue between Vicky Vale and Batman, and it's not going to work if they're not in separate cockpits.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, they can have walkie-talkies. And I just came up with
that scene would be so different with walkie-talkies.
It would be ridiculous. But bear in mind, I was 24 when I did this, so I didn't really know. I didn't know how to behave in front of directors and stuff like that. saying anything.
Well, and Tim Burton was young and really not that well known either, right? Like he had done
no, he was
1 or 2 films that were Beetlejuice obviously made him.
Yeah, Beetlejuice.
Yeah. But I mean, he was still a young guy that I think is really cutting his teeth in the business as well. This film, made him a household name as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. I mean, he was very enthusiastic, and he was always up in the art department, always sort of leaning over people's shoulder and stuff, not micromanaging, just kind of watching. And of course, he's a good sketch artist himself, so he was helping out there. But the great thing actually at that early stage was that Anton and Tim were absolutely on the same page, so it wasn't there was no sort of struggle there. But anyhow, after that initial drawing that I did, then came the drawing that no one seems to know where it is anymore. The original of the Batmobile drawing that I did with crayons.
Wow.
Coloured crayons, Caran d'Ache crayons. I mean, nice crayons. I haven't used them for years. And that image they responded to very well. And Anton used to say, "I think we've cracked it." And you knew when he said that it was kind of like there was some bedrock there that everybody could
work on,
work toward.
Yeah,
but it's certainly, when you say I designed it, I would never have pushed myself to the place where I got to if it wasn't for Anton's enthusiasm and trust. And I think the more I look back at that and him trusting this kid to do that, I thought that showed incredible generosity as well. But he, whenever I saw him during that production and after, toward the end of the production, he would always invite me around. He was very sort of gregarious guy who invited the entire art department around to his place for dinner and stuff like that. He would always introduce me to people I didn't know. This guy did the Batmobile, so I'm happy with that, and I wasn't going to contradict him and say no, please. But so that image was where it all started rolling off from. But there are so many hands on that car who I've kind of unsung. Again, I've mentioned them on my Instagram. People like Keith Short and Eddie Butler, who sculpted the full size polyfoam car. And they worked very closely with Anton, and Anton was very generous. He said, come to the shop and see how it's coming on. So, but those guys finessed a lot of stuff which you couldn't ever have got from the sketches that I did.
What was that process like, going to see your creation slowly build and get made in front of you, from a sketch to things tangible that you can see and touch?
Yeah, it was cool. It was very cool to do it. But I was working on other stuff at the time. So, in fact, it wasn't until I saw the thing in the street, in the set, when I kind of felt like, this is we've arrived. It was a slow process, or felt slow. Actually, by today's standards, it was very quick. But we were on the same page, so that was good. And Terry Ackland Snow, he was the guy who was art directing it, and he came up with some great design ideas for the car, like the petrol caps. I don't know if you remember the petrol caps.
I do, yeah.
They had just come from a London Routemaster bus.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had designed this rather over elaborate sort of bat-shaped petrol cap, and he just said, "No, we use this." And of course, it looked perfect because it's quite a brutal chunk of metal.
Yeah.
And also, he came up with the headlights, and he came up with the idea of the Ferrari lights at the back.
Right. Okay.
Did you design the cocoon for the car as well?
Sorry?
Did you design the cocoon arrangement for the car when it has its...
Yes. The illogical cocoon.
Yeah. Not sure quite where it comes from in the car. It just spreads, doesn't it? It's like a big...
Yes. Well, I seem to remember the script was quite vague about how the shielding worked.
Yeah.
And I can't remember doing very many other iterations for it. But along the side of the Batmobile, there's like these three gills.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember. On the front, there's kind of these three gills, which is a motif taken from a Corvette Stingray, the old Corvette Stingray, from the late 50s, maybe early 60s. But for some reason, I put that motif on the very front of the Cocoon. It seems to have sort of evolved its way up the car. I don't know. It was mad. But I had the idea, and I spoke to Anton and Tim about this. I said that when it cocoons, it should do so very quickly, because mechanically doesn't really make sense. If you have it going quick, ka-chunk, 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 you can sort of get away with it. And I stole that idea from a old famous 50s science fiction movie, Forbidden Planet.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you've seen that, but in that, I think it's Morbius, is it? The doctor, I can't remember the guy's name. He has this sort of these defenses around his house, which do exactly that. They go ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And it was just done with very simple animation. And that idea and that rhythm came from Forbidden Planet.
That has a very kind of alien vibe to it, that cocoon. I always felt it's that similar to the kind of the alien, what is it?
Shell,
yeah. That stuff they have on the walls. And
well, it's highly possible I had that in mind, because I was obsessed with Alien since it came out.
So with the Batwing, then you had another shot at another vehicle. How did that happen?
Well, I think because by that stage the car was kind of coming along without any of my input, I was put onto that. And I came up with some rather weird designs at first. I was thinking of kind of like microlights. You get these hang gliders and microlights with these sort of wings, but a sort of a solid version of that. And they weren't really working. It was kind of, I was kind of finding it hard to get a sort of a motif that felt like the car, like it had been built by the same people. Right. And I remember going up to town to a shop in Oxford Circus, which specialised in transport books. And in there, I found a book on stealth airplanes. And you have to remember that back then, the stealth aircraft we know, like the B-2 Spirit and the F-117 Nighthawk, they hadn't been released to the public. They existed, but they were top secret. Mm. So all of the images in this book were kind of artist impressions of what they might look like. And I remember there was a few images where the wings were almost like an oval with a point coming out the front. So I thought to myself, well, let's get rid of the front. We've almost got a flying saucer. And then I thought, this is almost the bat symbol here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember doing a little sketch, very, very simple sketch of a bat wing shape, of the bat symbol shape, I should say, in front of the moon. And I thought this might be something, an image that could be used in the film. It's just strengthening that sort of Batman sort of motif. Hang
on. So did you, by doing this and doing that in front of the moon, is that where that scene, is that what inspired that scene in the movie?
Well, it was the germ of it. I was thinking more of the bat symbol, when the big floodlight.
Yeah.
Yes.
When they use I was thinking more along those lines.
I see.
But but later on, I remember having a discussion. I did a little bit of storyboarding towards the end of the movie, and I had a discussion with Michael White, who was the main storyboard artist on the film. And I said, it would be great to have a camera move where you could have the jet be in front of the moon. And he said, well, why don't we do a shot where it stalls in front of the moon? I thought, well, that's perfect. So it was actually Michael White who came up with the idea of sitting it and stalling it in front of the moon.
Because that scene is just, it's so iconic to me. Like when I was a kid, I owned because I'm a big score guy as well, and Danny Elfman's score for that movie is just incredible. And I owned the CD and the vinyl, and like all these different things had that image on it. And it was like wherever you went, there was that, you know, and you would see like trailers or clips still to this day. If you wanted to watch like a trailer for Batman 89, someone's editing on YouTube or one, it's always used. That scene is always used because it is Batman just in a second. Like you could show that to anyone, not show them any other clip of the film and go, what's that film about? And they go, Batman. It's just obvious. It's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, it worked. I can remember seeing it in the cinema. When it came out, I took my mum, I took my grandmother to see it, and I can remember the reaction, the big reactions that I remember, because it was me. You know, I was thinking about my impact was when you first see the Batmobile, that beauty shot outside the Flugelheim Museum, and that shot of the Batwing. Sort of coming in front of the moon, and that sort of got a laugh. It got a good laugh actually, because it was kind of like it was so obvious that should be in the film, seeing as you have this bat symbol effectively in the form of the jet. So they got good reactions. Those shots. So I was very pleased.
They were miniatures, right? The Batwing. How big was the Batwing that was used in the film?
Well, the Batwing models were in about 3 or 4 different sizes.
Right.
There was one that was about sort of 12 feet in diameter, and there was one that was about 2 feet in diameter, and I think there was a much smaller one which was used for that shot. I think. I'm sure there's plenty of other people in the model who were sort of building in the model department who'd be able to tell you the different sizes.
Yeah, I've seen all the different sized Batmen sitting in the cockpit as well, and you had more detailed Batman face for the bigger one, and obviously there was a lot more paint design and like scratches, or like it looked like a proper close-up model.
Yeah.
And then there were smaller ones that were used for the the wide shots or the quick shots.
Yes, when you see it sort of flying across the city.
Yeah.
And when it's sort of dragging away the balloons, I think that one was quite small.
I mean, so that scene, the thing that's always stands out to me, besides the Batwing and the score that goes with it, which is just incredible, is just the camera work and the cinematography in that scene. I mean, as a kid, I never knew that was a model, right? And I didn't really realize until I became sort of late teenager and everything and kind of understood, because it just was so believable, and it just really looked like that's a plane that's actually flying. And for 1989 as well, it's an incredible feat to accomplish. You know, I know that Superman was your believe a man can fly, and obviously Christopher Reeve looked like he was flying because he was on wires and such, but to take a plane like that and put it into a film, and it doesn't exist. Like, there's not like, oh, I've seen planes fly, so I can imagine that's a real plane. You know, I just never questioned it as a kid. I was like, that is a real plane.
Well, the funny thing is about that movie is you can still watch it, and there's something artificial about the whole thing. I mean, you wouldn't have a city that looked like that, I don't think.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it all kind of works because there is an element of hyper reality to it in a sense. So you can kind of forgive, even watching it now, that the effects aren't the quality that you would have now, because everyone's engaged in the story. I'm always very aware of that watching films now, is that, or a film like Aliens, for instance, which I was watching just last night. There's a crash scene in that where the dropship is sort of tumbling across the landscape, and it actually doesn't look real, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because I know what you mean.
In the characters by then, it's like, well, we understand that this is a crash. I'm sure you could do that better now. Although I would prefer to see a model than CG, because there's a lovely chaos. There's lovely chaos to it, and that's true of the miniatures in Batman. You have it smashing along the road.
So that's a good point. That actually helps me with my example, is that the alien sequence where the spaceship crashes and tumbles and you're seeing it and everybody's running from it, and then that's the game over, man, and that whole sequence.
Yeah.
That I could tell is a model, right? I've always known that's a model. When the bat plane crashed, when Joker shoots it down, there is only one moment that I can tell that it's a model. Otherwise, the way it's shot, it looks like Batman's going down. There's close-ups of Keaton like in the cockpit as well with flames around. Like the shot choices in that really does look like it. There's only one bit where it kind of slides past some parked cars, and you can tell, oh, those parked cars are a model. Yeah. Otherwise, it does really look like that plane went down, just the way it's shot. And it's an amazing sequence. Were you on set a lot for the '89 film?
I wasn't on set much at all. I would go and, Anton would encourage me to go and see all the sets. I remember going inside the art gallery, which is a beautiful set. They're all beautiful sets. And I wish I had spent more time going around them, but I don't remember spending too much time watching shooting or anything like that. But I do remember going up to the back lot, as I mentioned earlier, and they were doing a night shoot. And Anton said, you should go up there. The Batmobile's on the street. And I walked up there, and it was all dressed, and it was all beautifully lit, the whole street. And there was smoke coming out of the manhole covers in the road, and it all looked very atmospheric, and everybody was in costume. And I remember walking up the street, and I was like, well, where is the Batmobile? Where is it? And I couldn't see it. And I actually walked past it because it was so dark. And it was so, because it was like in the context of the street, and it's sitting next to other real cars. It wasn't that much bigger than most of the other cars that were sitting on the street, because we had some big American cars. So I even though I was on the other side of the road, I actually walked past it. But when I saw it sitting there, it was great just sort of seeing it with all the light kicking off it, because they did such a beautiful paint job on that film, on the car. It looked like it was like a purple, like the purple you get on sort of Beetles. If you look at sort of like,
I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, and they did a beautiful job, and they were constantly polishing it. And actually, as they polished it, it sort of started to go brown over the course of the film. And I think they must have repainted it.
Wow!
Because when it first looked in that street, it looked great. And all of the add-ons for the car that were put on there by the special effects people. There's a lot of stuff, like there's a lot of sort of pipe chutney going on the side of the car underneath the cockpit, which I had nothing to do with. But they did a really lovely job there.
And I think I read, it was maybe on your Instagram page, that Batman's ears didn't fit in the car. Yeah. Was that right to start with?
The thing is that although they measured Michael Keaton to sit in it, obviously when it was done, it wasn't thinking about the ears as well. So when they first sat him in the car, as the cockpit rolled up the bonnet, the little ears were sticking through the gap.
Not very cool, Batman. Not very cool.
Yeah, I don't know what the finger pointing was at that point, but I sort of thought, oh shit, why did I make the car so low? But I think they made the seat lower, and they also changed the costume and made shorter ears. So I expect the costume people weren't too happy with with that little slip up, because probably somebody had to work overnight to redo the helmet.
That. And how drivable was the car? Like, could you have just taken it out into London?
I think it was pretty straightforward. Yeah, I remember sitting in it, but I don't think I drove around in it. I mean, obviously I didn't drive it, but I wasn't in the passenger seat. But it could go pretty fast.
That's cool.
It was because there's that sort of sequence in it where he leaves the city and heads off toward Wayne Manor, and you see it going through the woods. I think they got it up to 70 or 80 miles an hour.
Wow!
And of course, with the right lens, if you've got a good wide angle lens, it seems to disappear even faster than it would with a
that sequence. You've got leaves going everywhere and light coming through the trees, and it's just whipping down this wet road. Yeah, it's a great sequence. It looks really good,
and it's such a contrast to the rest of the movie as well. It sort of feels almost dreamlike in relation to all the other.
I think I think that I can remember seeing that scene, and not just because I was involved in the car, but I felt exactly like that. It was dreamlike, and there's a great shot of Vicky Vale. Just kind of like, she seems to be sort of like, what the fuck is going on around here? She sort of puts her head in her hand, and I thought it was a great bit of acting, actually, because it was like she's been plunged into this kind of lunatic world, and she's just having to deal with it,
The name of the score, actually, that plays over that scene is called Descent into Mystery, so even Danny Elfman knew it was.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
He understood what the scene was about as well. And certainly
Absolutely.
Tim.
You mentioned Tim, and you said that he would always look over people's shoulders and stuff. Did you have any other interactions with Tim Burton that you can remember?
Well, he was very often up in the art department. He was very, very hands-on. He had a very clear idea of what he wanted to see. I do remember everything that I showed him that he liked, from the vehicles to all of the utility belt stuff. He would do this little giggle, and you knew when he did this giggle that was that you were going down the right path. I distinctly remember that with the cowling that we talked about earlier, the armor plated Batmobile. He really responded to that.
So with the utility belt you mentioned, the grappling gun specifically, how did that all come to you, and the design, and what inspired the grappling gun?
I can't remember how it came in the order of things. I think it came after doing the Batwing sketches, but I seem to remember that the sort of doctrine for it was that none of the gadgets should be bigger than a cassette tape case. So we're going back in time where anybody can remember what a cassette tape looks like, and the size of it. So I literally drew round, I think, a B-52's cassette that I had in the room, and did everything to scale. That was something I could do to scale, because it was right there. And I was struggling with the idea of doing grappling hooks that small. So I thought to myself, well, maybe we need to have two pieces to this in separate, in separate compartments to the belt that he puts together. That's my recollection of how that came about. But most of the look of that was from the city, from the way that the city looked. Lots of the buildings. If you look at, there's a fantastic architect called Shin Takamatsu, who was very instrumental in being a sort of an influence to the way that film looked. And I looked at his drawings as well. Shin Takamatsu used to do these beautiful pencil drawings, and I basically looked at those and tried to use those sort of images for the mechanics of these little instruments, with like ducting and little slats here and there.
Because it comes around on the belt. A lot of his gadgets, especially the grappling hook, it like has this almost like rotation, like it's at the back of the belt, and then
yes, it's a
shots where, Yeah. So was that anything that when you were creating it that you were involved in, or is that something that came after you designed it?
The belt was completely a costume thing, as far as I remember. So I was just providing those things. But yes, now you mention it, it's reminded me that they didn't all have like a box that they sat in. They just came around the belt, didn't they?
It's almost like he had everything on his back, and the belt was just a belt there for show, and then it would just rotate around, which for the film, I think worked great. But as far as utility belts go, it's not the most practicable. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think probably with Tim Burton's animation background, he was quite happy to do that in the same way that we're happy with Tom and Jerry just reaching behind his back and pulling out a giant stick of dynamite,
Yeah, it's a good point.
That's sort of same sort of vibe.
And you did a sketch of the symbol, didn't you, on the back, on the actual suit? There was a sketch you put up, I think, nice shaded symbol sketch, and you designed that as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that wasn't for his chest plate.
Right.
That was a costume, probably costume props thing. But that image that I had was toward the end of the production. We just put a sort of like a presentation booklet for the producers and Warner Brothers in the States. And Anton just wanted a cover for it. And rather than just stick, the word sort of Batman on the front, we did that symbol. And I just sort of thought it wouldn't be great if we had it sort of like this metallic. I thought of almost like a medal.
Yeah.
So I did again with the crayons, tried to get the look of it being stainless steel and bronze. And that went off to the States. And I remember a few weeks later, I think it was probably when I was doing storyboarding towards the end of the film production, Anton just said, "Here, look what's come back from the States." And I said, what are these? And he said, "What? This is the poster design."
Yeah.
And there were several different sort of iterations based on that thing. But as I stress, that wasn't my symbol design. That logo existed as a DC thing already. I just put that sort of metallic.
But your metallic representation was it's very cool.
I mean, that was in every kid's bedroom, man. That was in mine. That was in it was Bat Fever. Yeah, exactly. And as you said, that's DC's symbol, but that tweak of the bronze and everything, that's solely identified for the 89 movie. If you see a number of different bat signals, if you see the one with the bronze, you're like, oh, that's the Keaton symbol for 89. And then obviously it was different for Returns because it had like the snowy white and
it was white, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So speaking of Returns, did you do any work on the sequel?
No, I think Warner spent a lot of money keeping the set up of Gotham at Pinewood, but I think that there was a big fluctuation in the pound versus the dollar in the next couple of years, and I think that they thought it'd be cheaper to make in the States. It may have been that, it may have been Michael Keaton, for all I know. Sometimes these movies get made on people's doorsteps because the actor says so. But as far as I remember, it was a financial decision. But I'm sure I'm sure it would be nice if I don't know even if it exists, but I've got several books of making of this film, making of that film, but there's not a big comprehensive book of Batman as far as I know. Maybe you know different.
I remember having a Batman the movie book which came out around that time, and I think it might have one of your designs in it. And that I remember came out, but it's quite thin. It's more of a kind of it's not that comprehensive, I suppose.
Yeah,
but I do remember.
It'd be nice to have a one which was full of sort of interviews from every department. To get a little bit more of a rounded view of stuff, because my view of it is one thing, but people, others. It's like, for instance, on Aliens. I just remember it being a great fun thing to be involved in, but I saw a documentary not long ago where they were saying, "Oh, it was terrible production because the production, James Cameron was at loggerheads with, the production and stuff like that. And I don't remember any of that.
Yeah, well, I saw that as well. That's the ILM one, isn't it? On
Don't
Disney
know. I mean,
Plus.
I remember Derek Cracknell, who was the first AD, being fired, but then he was reinstated very, very quickly.
Right.
But the
Okay.
vast majority of the stuff which you see in these modern documentaries, I was like not aware of, and the same may be true on Batman. So I'm just talking about my perspective of stuff.
Yeah, of course. And no,
Yeah.
I love to hear it. That's why you're on. So did the grappling gun ever work? Was it functioning at all, or was it just like there's a harpoon in at one point and then trickery by the camera the next?
That's a question for special effects, Johnny Evans's department.
Gotcha.
By
Okay.
the time those things, Johnny Evans showed me them all finished, and they were really beautifully finished. But I never saw them going on stage or being shot on. But back then, the nice thing was you get to go to the rushes and see what was being shot the day before, which is something you don't do so much of now. And I think the last time I saw rushes was on Rogue One, and it wasn't really rushes. It was like a presentation reel of stuff that Gareth Edwards had shot. That was very exciting, and it was exciting to go to rushes. But as I say, I haven't gone to rushes for a long time.
And when you're working on, I mean, Aliens is a good example because you were wearing alien costumes at times, right? Like, did you have any idea of, the scope, how big these movies would be, or you just hope for the best?
Well, the funny thing was with Aliens, was I was very grateful for the work. Obviously, I was very excited to be doing a sequel to Alien because I think Alien is still in my top 10 movies of all time. But when I read the script, I was like, I'm not sure this is going to work because it feels too American, and there's lots of badass. The Hudson character on the page, I didn't think it was going to work, but Bill Paxton was genius in that film.
Yeah.
So I had my misgivings, but it wasn't until I was excited by elements of it. But I can the first time I remember thinking this is going to be huge was, Julian, come on the stage. You've got to help operate the Queen. So, okay. So I went over there and, you've got the handles. Somebody's operating the jaw, somebody's operating fingers, etc. Well, you went on the set and it was all lit and it was all mist everywhere. And the power loader stood there in front of the Queen. And it was just epic just to look at it. I just went, this is going to be huge.
Yeah.
And
wow.
The rest is history.
There was another picture, I think, of you looked like they were testing out was it the Queen's tail coming through Bishop?
Yeah, I was the dog's body on that. I mean, I was the cheapest guy in the films. Like, you stand there and we'll cover you in X, Y, and Z.
Rip you in half.
Yes. It was good fun. It was great fun.
Well, next time I watch Aliens, I'm just going to think about you controlling certain parts when I'm watching now.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of Aliens, they ran out of money. As far as I know, Fox was wanted Cameron to stop shooting. And he paid for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks out of his own pocket on L&M stages at Pinewood.
Right.
And he had like a very skeletal crew.
Yeah.
All the Americans had gone home. And we did lots of little sort of cut-in shots of things like the face huggers in the shower, when the water's coming down, the fire showers and stuff like that. And the chase away from the colony through the air ducts, they had a bit of this set up. And James Cameron was just wandering around, sort of like looking at who was doing the least, like a lot of the hand shots of Ripley operating the power loader are a friend of mine, Nigel Booth.
All right.
Because his hands, he was like James Cameron, just wandering around, look at people's hands. He's like, show me your hands. Yeah, you're the best fit for this. So that's, And then on this particular occasion, me standing next to this duct, this air duct, says, Julian, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. He says, get into that alien outfit. What? Yeah, you get into that alien outfit and come back here and we'll shoot you. You'll be the alien.
Yeah.
So I went upstairs. And
yes, James Cameron.
And I got into this outfit, which was incredibly uncomfortable. So I've got nothing but respect for all the stuntmen who had to wear those all the time.
Yeah.
And climbed into this duct, and it's the shot where Vasquez pins the head of the alien to the wall and shoots it in the head. And by then, of course, the actress, is it Jeanette Goldstein?
Yes.
She'd gone home, so the stunt woman played her part, and I think actually Galen Hurd played Vasquez at one point.
Right.
So I was in there, and my friend Nigel, who was Ripley's hand double, was putting like KY jelly all over my head with a brush.
Yeah.
And James Cameron came by and just picked up the bucket and said, Nigel, you've got to have an attitude about this, and just threw the entire bucket of KY all over me.
Wow.
Which was actually quite a relief because the lights were actually really hot. So it was kind of like having a cold shower.
Brilliant.
But that was kind of a little bit of a magic moment. And I appear for about 3 seconds in the film. My 3 seconds of fame.
Absolutely. That's very cool.
So with the Batmobile from 1989 all the way to 2023,
yeah,
we have recently seen it again on the big screen. And you were involved in that. What did you do for the Flash?
The Flash, I didn't come on it till a little bit later in the production. I was involved in the black site,
right?
The Russian black site,
right? Okay.
That they visit in. I think it's in the Urals or somewhere. I can't remember.
Somewhere like somewhere like that. Yeah, exactly. They're looking for Superman, which ends up being Supergirl. Yeah,
correct. Spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it.
Spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, but I was doing that journey when Batman and the two, what's his character's name? The Flash.
Barry.
Barry Allen.
There's the two Barrys, aren't there?
Oh, yeah. Barrys, yeah.
I sort of did their journey through the black site. So the first thing I did was the actual structure with the two silos that open.
Right.
Did that for a few weeks till we sort of finished and found what we wanted and the script requirements. And then I got involved in doing the sort of catacombs below that. And finally, the containment chamber where patient A is being held prisoner. Right. But that was quite a lot of work. That was quite a few months of work figuring that out. And the great part about that was knowing that it was largely going to be constructed for real. I remember Paul.
One of the few scenes in the film that I felt like was real and not CG fabrication. To be honest with you.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You know, the whole finale, without spoiling anything, is clearly not in a desert. It's clearly on a green screen, and it looks so fake. And yeah, there's a lot of CG controversy for this film. I don't know if you've seen it be going around, but that scene with Batman and the two Flashes going into that facility, no one has said anything but good things about that scene, because it gives you one of the coolest Michael Keaton Batman moments for him to return, which is him coming down and using your grappling gun that you helped design to take down a bunch of like Russian or Eastern European guys, wherever they're from, and basically fuck people up. And it looks so cool. And you got the score playing. Cool. Yeah, it did. It was a great sequence for the film.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be interested to know what you think from, again, from seeing your designs or concepts come to life in front of you, like you did back in 1989 or all these other films you
Well,
worked
the
on.
thing is that CG has its place, and I'm a massive fan of the the recent Avatar movie that Cameron did. I mean, I was absolutely blown away by the scope of that thing, but it absolutely works for all of that world that he's created for that.
Yeah.
Sure.
But with a movie like this, it becomes tricky because you have people doing impossible things like running so fast,
Yeah.
etc., like that. You can't really do them in any way except that the way that they've done them. There's many elements to consider in these things. Is that I know that Paul Ostbury, the designer, wanted to do the Batcave for real, and if you look at the 1989 version, the Batcave is seen quite sparsely,
Yeah.
and there's a
Yes.
wide shot, which is I believe it's a matte painting, which was, I think the painting was designed by Nigel. I don't know who actually executed the map painting, but I think that he understood that having the cave be all real, even though it was a huge set, would probably be cheaper
Hmm.
than actually doing the whole thing as a CG
I think it goes back
environment.
to what you were saying about the sort of the that we forgive models. It's just there's this tactile quality to them, isn't there? They're real. And so
Yeah.
I think they're more believable than some of the CGI environments that are created. I mean, in Avatar 2, it's all this, again, a kind of hyper real world. So it works very well. But finding a balance in other movies, I think it must be very difficult.
Well, it's probably the best visual effects I've ever seen. They've had a schedule that they can do properly. I don't know what the schedule for the visual effects were on the Flash,
Yeah.
but I'm sure they've got plenty of brilliant technicians on it.
Yeah. Well, the
But the
thing
best,
the thing with CG is that because I actually used to work in CG production for many years in London, and one thing that all of my artists would always say was the thing about bad CG is that you notice it and it's always pointed out and it's always talked about. But if it's good CG, the whole point is it looks real, so you don't even know it's CG. So it never gets credit. You never get credit for producing something that's
no,
so
no,
realistic. Yeah, and that was something the
Yeah.
artist said, and that makes a lot of sense to me because that's a hard field to be in when you do such good work. People don't even know
They take it for granted.
they take for granted. Exactly. Yeah.
and also the digital quality that you're getting nowadays is you're dealing with a lot more pixels than you were dealing with 10 years ago as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more. There's a lot of it is a bit of a minefield. But if you're making a film like Gravity, with the amount of time that took and the amount of money that it cost and the amount of Frame Store were working on that for
Yeah.
like well over a year, as far as I know,
Yeah.
and it shows because it's absolutely incredible visual effects.
Does look incredible.
And then you've got another film like Casino Royale, for instance, and it's what you were talking about earlier. There's loads of visual effects in that, digital
Yep.
visual effects in that, which people aren't aware of.
Yeah.
Have you worked on any Bond films, Julian?
I worked on Casino Royale, yeah.
Okay, so that is well, okay. Most of the listeners that are listening now know I'm a massive James Bond fan, and that is the film that really just pushed and heightened my fandom to a whole new level for the Bond franchise. For me, it's always been Bond and Batman. Those have been, my two favorite franchises.
Right.
Those have been my guys. Casino Royale is a brilliant film and is a great example of perfect mixture of both sets and models or real tangible special effects and then CG and digital effects as well. And the blend is perfect, I think, in that film. It works so well. What
Yeah.
what were you involved in on Casino Royale then?
I was doing. At the beginning of that, we were figuring out the construction site scene at the beginning,
The chase sequence.
the chase sequence. Yes, I know that Peter Lamont, the designer, had a lot of trouble finding locations for the whole movie, actually. But
because that was Bahamas, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the thing is, he'd worked out in the Bahamas before and had remembered this unfinished hotel.
Yep.
And I don't know whether he knew that it was still there or whether he made some phone calls to find out if it was still there. But it saved a ton of money because of obviously having to create that set from the ground up would have been prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
What they did do was add a lot of the I-beams in the front of that concrete structure and the cranes themselves. But you had most of the set was there. It was effectively a location, an addressed location. But what I was tasked with was taking information that I'd got from Stephen Lawrence, who's one of the art directors. He'd been out to the Bahamas and measured the site up, and I created that in 3D.
Wow.
In Lightwave, and textured it and rendered it and did a little sort of film. Now, the purpose of doing that little film was that the director, Martin Campbell, couldn't go on location at the time because he was tied up with doing publicity for Mask of Zorro.
Right.
Oh, one of my favorite films. That movie so much.
It might have been. Was that the sequel? The sequel was.
Oh, Legend of Zorro. Legend of Zorro.
It was Legend of Zorro. He was doing
not as good, but still,
not as good, but not bad.
Still decent.
But he was doing the publicity for that. So I had done this film it was kind of like a walk through the buildings so that he could get an idea for the parkour sequence, that the path that he would take. You can see that film on my crop website. It's very primitive, but you can see from it where they went, as its jumping off point, as it were. Excuse the pun. And when he saw that, when Martin saw that, when he came back from his publicity, he was like, well, yes, let's do it there. And it went down very well. And Peter Lamont and Simon Lamont were very grateful for it being there to sort of be a shorthand to okay the idea of going there. And I think I used some music for the Bourne Identity over it.
Right. Oh, right. Well, those Craig films, especially Quantum of Solace, took a lot of inspiration from the Bourne franchise. So it's been the way they were shot. So
the way that they were edited, certainly.
Yeah,
the way that
edited,
they were edited, I don't know who was the editor for both. I think it was Stuart Baird, wasn't it? It
was different editors, but same writers. Neil Purvis and Wade,
yeah. But then after that we did Africa. there's the park behind Pinewood is called Black Park.
Oh, so that sequence at the beginning where you've got Mads Mikkelsen basically meeting with the guys trying to get money and invest and all of that. So that's all shot at Pinewood
all Black
Studios.
Park.
Yeah. Wow.
They did a great job on that because I was when they shoot it there, I was like, Peter was like, no, it'll be fine. We'll just dress it with a few, we'll dress it with a few palm trees, and everybody will their eyes will be drawn to those things. They won't be drawn to the oaks and all this sort of stuff. But there's like a little bald spot in the middle of Black Park. And again, there's an illustration on my crop site which you can see. And I took some photographs. I went out with Peter into the park, and he said, well, we're going to shoot it from here, and we'll build this here and build that there. He said, when it's raining, it'll be raining. You won't see into the distance. You won't see the pine trees in the background. And he covered it in loads of mud, red mud. And I think most people who didn't know would thought it had been done in the Congo or something like that.
I thought that was on location. I didn't think it. Maybe I thought it was in Africa, but I thought that was location. I didn't know it was Black Park. That's crazy. That's cool.
But that's kind of part of my job is helping to convince directors that you can dress something and make it look like this. And one of that was kind of one of my favorite examples of doing it. I think I did 2 or 3 illustrations of it, of what that would look like. And, you know, there would be a parked helicopter and things burning, like, you know, oil drums burning and stuff like that. And there was the aeroplane scene, which I did some work on that. That went on for a little while. And I did some gadgets on that one as well. There was if you remember the gun, which he puts, there's a chip gun that they put in Bond's arm.
Yeah.
And the case.
Oh, yeah. Okay, the tracking device.
Yes, that was something I did, but which again, I had a scale problem. Obviously, I've still got this bit of a scale problem. The gun was massive when it turned out, but I didn't scale it, and it sat perfectly in the case. But when you see the guy handling it, it feels massive. I wanted it to be sort of quite a little thing, but actually, it didn't matter because it looked like it hurt him. You know,
yeah,
it did look really painful. Yeah.
Yeah. Though, especially the way he goes, "Ow," when it goes in. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Doesn't do that often, does he?
No, he doesn't. So, Julian, what are you working on now?
Well, I've just finished a stint on Gladiator 2, which is kind of in the middle of production. I was doing props on that. That was a good fun job, but at the beginning of that, I was completely out of my comfort zone. Wow. Designing chairs and tables and things like that, which I haven't really done before. They're quite complicated sort of sculpts. There's like thrones and stuff like that. But I was working for Ty Teager, who I've worked with before. I worked with him on Judge Dredd. He's a smashing bloke. And
the Stallone Judge Dredd? The
Stallone Judge Dredd, yes.
Man, I feel like you're just chucking out all these films. Like, oh yeah, so I worked on Judge Dredd as well. I mean, just quickly, what did you do on Judge Dredd? The listeners are going to be like, no, ask him about Judge Dredd. What did you do on
comics,
Dredd?
Don't they? The listeners.
Yeah.
Well, I was doing all the weapons on that.
The guns?
Most of the weapons. I did work on the Lawgiver, but the Lawgiver original design was Kev Walker. He was a comic artist. He did stuff on 2000 AD. He came up with the original design with the sort of nice little red lights on it. But what I had to do was model it over a Beretta, a real pistol.
Right.
So there was that. But the rest of the guns were, I think they were over AK-47s. All of them had to be clad over real blank firing weapons.
Right. But all the judges had the Berettas, or the version of the Beretta.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
But nowadays you can do practically anything gun-wise, because obviously you can do visual effects of the muzzle flash, etc. But back then, I think it would have been prohibitively expensive to do all the visual effects of the muzzle flashes. So that was the plan on that, which is why they're all quite bulky guns. But I didn't mind, because I thought that felt like it was true to the comics. Because in the comics, they have insane guns, don't they?
Yeah, they're really chunky.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they've got like 12 different modes of firing. So that makes sense.
But the logic behind that is that Nigel went on to become a production designer after Batman, and we remained friends. So when Judge Dredd came up, he called me, and I was like, great. I think I'd been working on something else, so I didn't come in on the beginning, but I came on later on, and this was before computers, so I was doing a lot of marker pen images of the guns.
There's a lot of matte painting in that movie as well, with CG effects, but a lot of matte paint backgrounds I remember as well. Yes,
there was some early CG done of the city.
Yeah.
Some shots working more successfully than others, but what was the point I was going to make? Oh yes, I was going to make a point about the importance of seeing these objects in 3D. Now that I'm doing 3D, using 3D software, you can sort of walk around your object or your set and get an idea of what will be seen from a particular angle with a particular lens. But when I was doing the stuff on the Lawgiver, because I was just doing it in plan, section, elevation, I didn't realize when somebody made a mock-up how brick-like it was. And it didn't have very much elegance. And I remember going to Joss Williams, who was the special effects guy on that. I said, I'd really like to change the bottom of the barrel of that because it's kind of flat. I wanted it to be round, a bit more like the Blade Runner gun.
Yeah.
Deckett's gun. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, it's already gone in the mold, mate. So you kind of have what you sometimes see is like, I had some guy on Instagram saying how much he loved that gun. When I look at it, I always go, if I'd just done that a few hours earlier, it would have looked better. If I'd managed to figure out in 3D how chunky it was going to look. I do remember we just built everything in polyfoam.
Yeah.
And when you see them in actual 3 dimensions versus seeing it on a plan section of elevation on a flat piece of paper, it's a very different thing. So I remember we did these things, and some of them looked just ridiculous. They were like the Zeppelins, and so we'd gone way too far. So it's like we need to dial it down. So that's a great advantage of being able to use 3D software.
I wondered, you've talked a lot about the different things you worked on. Was there any particularly memorable or rewarding unveiling of your concepts that you remember?
Well, I would say that would go to Batman, because seeing the Batman, seeing the Batmobile, that whole sequence, there's a little sequence where Batman comes to the ceiling of the Flugelheim, and he's holding the, what the hell do you call that thing?
Well, it's like
the one that goes like 2 ways.
Yeah, it's like what is that called? Where you slide down it almost with the, like a zip line.
Yeah, it's a zip line thing. I called it a grappling hook on my drawings.
Right.
That was very satisfying, because talking about interactions with Tim, he and Anton had asked me to do this thing, and it had been explained in the script that it sort of unfolds into this zip wire. And I said, I think that my original design was quite big and bulky, and it had to be truncated, because Tim said, well, look, he can't stand there in front of the Joker and start unfolding this thing and putting it on his arm, because he'd be shot dead, which of course was
be an amazing sequence. Just Batman like, hold on one more second.
5 minutes. You're going to like this. Just wait. So yeah, there was that thing. So it was decided that it would already be on his arm, but I did a much more simplified version. But I said, wouldn't it be great if he comes out of the ceiling and he's pointing these 2 spikes directly at Joker? And Joker thinks my number's up here, and then they split apart and fire into the walls. And so that little bit of action was something that I came up with.
Wow.
And
cool.
And so Tim responded very well for that. So from that moment till he gets in the car, that was very exciting to me, because I was like, oh yeah, that's something I did. And then I remember my mum was sitting next to me when Batman and Vicky Vale disappear through the door. There's that shot of the Joker at the top of the balcony saying, "Where did you get those wonderful toys?"
Yeah.
And my mum said in my ear, he said, "You gave them to him." So that was kind of a nice one.
Oh, bless your mum for doing that. That's lovely. Joker, that's my son that did that, actually. That's where he gets Batman. That's where Batman gets
She didn't get up in the cinema, thankfully.
That's awesome.
And then, the Batmobile reveal got a cheer, so that was very, very exciting. So yeah, I don't think that in terms of any other movie that I've done where I saw it in the film, I didn't get as big a kick out of anything as much as I did Batman. Although I was pleased to be involved in other films like Casino Royale and Gravity and stuff like that. Just great films in and of themselves. To say I was part of that was nice, even though what I did didn't have that much of an impact that, for instance, the stuff on Batman did. I was just going to say, I wanted to say a final thing about Dan Walker's work on the Flash, because he redid the Batwing on that, and I think he did a really marvelous job of reimagining it. Because I don't think that the one that I did would have fit into that film, because I felt it had a far more modern feel.
It's interesting you say that, because when it first shows up, I immediately rejected it in my mind when I first saw it, as in, no, why are you flying that? But then I realized, oh well, the last Batwing was obviously shot down by the Joker, so of course when he goes back to a redesign, he's going to make it different. And as the film went on, there was some cool things about the Batwing. One, there's a rotating cockpit, which I thought was pretty cool. Actually,
you did like that rotating cockpit.
I did, yeah. Ben, you didn't. It wasn't like you didn't not like it, but
I liked it too. But Alex,
yeah,
really
but I when I saw that, I was like, well, that's cool. And that just kind of, then as the film went on and you'd see the Batwing in more action, I kind of instantly embraced it as the new Batwing for Keaton's Batman. So yeah, I thought it was a really cool design, paying tribute to yours whilst being something new and fitting for the film.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it says something about the different approaches that I had back in '89 versus now, was that I couldn't have created the Batmobile in the way that Dan has done the Batwing for the new movie, because of his background in vehicle design. He basically did the whole thing inside and out under Paul's direction. But what I did was taken out of my hands to all kinds of artists and technicians. Nowadays, I can present something to these people which they can extrapolate with defined measurements and stuff like that. So I'm always pleased when people say, "Oh, you did the Batmobile," but it's really it was a collaborative effort, and the decisions that were made to get it to the finishing line were not nearly just mine. There were plenty of people. For instance, one of the main ones is when we were looking at the picture. I think I'm not going to say who it was because I can't remember exactly, but somebody said, "How do we get into this thing?" And I suddenly had this sort of cold fear that I hadn't designed any doors for it. And if you look at the sketch, it doesn't make any sense. I was like, oh God, how am I going to do gull wing doors? What are we going to do? And it was actually Nigel on the other side of the room, Nigel Phelps, said, just slide the thing down the bonnet. And it was like, it was obvious, but I didn't see it. So again, it's a decision like that. You know, it wouldn't have been anything without those other people around me sort of guiding me through those obstacles. Because as I say, I was only 25 when I did that.
Yeah, and I think, but it's, you're right. And there were a lot of hands on that Batmobile, as you said earlier, which I think all ultimately created the perfect Batmobile. I mean, it is definitively the best looking Batmobile. Anyone that thinks different is wrong, as far as I'm concerned, because it is just straight up the coolest car I've ever seen on screen, and I'm counting all iterations of other vehicles that people think are cool. It's still the coolest looking car I've ever seen.
It was my favorite toy I ever had. That Batmobile, when the movie came out, had the plastic Batmobile, and it had a cocoon you could put on top of it, which it was the best thing ever.
And you got to know the design of the Batmobile through the toy. Like you were talking about all of like the
Very
piping
specific.
on the sides. The toy had that. So you really, I remember more details about my toy than I do about the film when I was a kid, because obviously I could see it was tangible and I would play with it and use it all the time. And one thing I've just remembered now that I haven't asked you yet is the hidden machine guns where it pops up on the hood. Was that something that somebody else put into the design, or is that something that you started with and went through iterations?
That little shape, that sort of it looks like a Romanesque window that sits on the top of the car with the grills. Yes, I came up with that idea, but I wanted to have miniguns come out. like the ones in Predator.
Yeah.
Right.
The Blaine character has, but
Yeah.
and I sort of showed Anton. I said, look at this minigun. It'd be great to have this. We just eviscerate everything. And I think he was down with the idea, but I don't think that they could get a license to bring one into the UK.
Okay.
So it was those Brownings, which kind of fit. They feel like they belong in Gotham. Those Brownings.
Yeah.
So
absolutely, man. Well, Julian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can our listeners find you? Where do you want to direct them to if they want to see all of the things that you worked on and what you're currently working on?
Well, you can go to the Crop website. That's KROP, and just put Julian Caldow in, and it'll guide you all the way there. And I've just this morning put the Flash concepts on there, so they can see those as well.
Amazing.
And you can have a look at them, and you'll know what I did actually work on and what I didn't.
Yeah, they're very cool. Had a quick look today.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. I mean, I feel like I could, if I ran into you at a pub, I think that I wouldn't leave that pub for a good 5 hours. And I would force you to stay there and tell me about all the films that you worked on. You worked on some amazing things. You've done some amazing things. So, yeah, thank you for all of your work that you continue to do and that you've done, because as a kid and up until now, you created a lot of magic on screen.
Well, ultimately, that's why I do it. Sometimes I sort of feel I do a sort of silly job, frivolous job, but when it means a lot to other people, then it's worth doing. So
that's the job, man. You're a superhero in your own way.
Thank you.
Well, Julian, thanks so much again, and hopefully we can have you on another time to chat about all these other films that I'm sure once I hang up, I'm going to be like, oh, he worked on that? I want to ask him about that. So maybe we can have you back.
Well, feel free.
Thank you so much,
Julian. That was amazing.
Cheers.
Ta-da. Look after yourselves.